course today?
I drove, so I was training John Godina in New and so I drove John on the course today. We just did the half marathon part of it today. I was gonna do the marathon, but my marathon, it's the other ones that are racing on Saturday and stuff, so I got cut short. But yes, but John was so nervous about the hills. And I'm like, all right, let's go drive them. Plus it'd be good.
Yeah.
Hello.
Ready?
All right, we are ready. We are 6:01.
Welcome, everybody. How are you? I'm Jeff Dengate. I'm runner-in-chief at Runner's World.
Amy Begley, coach of Atlanta Track Club.
And hopefully you're here for the course strategy session. Right, Blaze? All right. We are going to talk about the course. Amy was just telling me she drove it a little while ago, refamiliarized herself with sections. I have not run it personally, but I've done enough marathons and talked strategy on a lot of marathons and helped a lot of people get through their first or their most successful. So hopefully we can give you a little wisdom heading into race day. At first, I want to just ask, how many people is it their first marathon ever? Congratulations, you have a PR coming. I don't know about the rest of you. I hear it's kind of tough. How many people is it the first Publix Atlanta marathon? All right, exciting. So we got some good stuff for you.
And how many of you have run it more times than you can count? I was going to say, yeah, there's a few. I was going to say, I recognize a few of you. So, yes, you've run it a few times. This course is Atlanta to a T, and we love it. It goes through all of our favorite places, and it gives you all of the hills that we could definitely find. Except for the start. You get to go down a little bit at the start. Your first hill isn't until about after the first mile. But what we want to talk about the start is it gets a little congested because there's planters in the middle and there's some statues. And as you know, the start can always get a little congested. And how many of you out there do run walk? You take intervals in running walk? So if you're out there doing that, it can get a little congested, and the best strategy is to stay to one side or the other so that you can have a clear path and people behind you can have a clear path if you're going to do the run walk intervals. And once you get probably mile 2 or 3, then things start to at least spread out a little bit. But be patient the first mile. It is downhill. People get excited and they want to go out a little bit fast. And then by mile 1, when they hit that first hill, they kind of slow down a little bit and it gets a little bit congested again. So just be calm and know that after about mile 2 or 3, it will spread out once you hit the hills, to say the least.
Yeah, if you are coming into this race properly tapered, if you've done your 3-week taper like we always recommend, when that gun goes off, that first mile is going to feel so easy, and everybody around you is going to be sprinting like they just got let out of jail. Don't do that. Do not do that. Really hold back, especially in that first mile since it's downhill. You don't want to get yourself into a spot where you go out just too quick. There's plenty of ground to make up time if you go out a little bit too slow, and I would err on the side of a little bit too slow in this race especially.
And for example, the people that want to follow pacers, did anybody sign up for a pace group to run with pacers? Yes. All right, and we actually have a pacer, right? Are you pacing this year? All right. So if you're going to follow a pacer, they are very skilled in this course. So if you signed up for a pacer and you're running with them and you start thinking, oh, they're running too slow, or just take a deep breath because they know what they're doing and they will get you to the finish. And honestly, following a pace group is going to be your best bet the first couple miles. I even would tell you to run the first half with the pace group because it's going to keep you from feeling that excited, leaving jail, going out too fast. Because once you hit those hills and about halfway through, you're going to wish you probably would have followed the pacer, especially if they pass you. All right, so start with the pace group, take a deep breath, relax, and get to know all the people in the pace group. And I tell people, if after halfway, maybe by mile 20, you're feeling good and you made a new friend, ask them if they would like to leave the pace group and go a little bit faster. They're going to find a lot of friends in that pace group.
Yeah, on that topic of pace groups, you got to be a little bit careful when you're in the pace group. If it's a big one especially, everybody wants to run right with the pacer, like right on them. And, it gets squirrely in there. People are nervous. They're dodging things, and you don't want to get tripped up. You don't need to be right on the pacer. If you're in sight of the pacer, you're a few steps back of them, you're a few steps ahead of them, you're around them, totally fine. Just use them as sort of that moving clock, if you will. It's helpful for you really to calm your nerves or to relieve any of that anxiety. As Amy said, just trust them. They know what they're doing, but you might not know their strategy. Some pacers are going to try to be like basically a moving clock. They're going to keep an even pace the whole way. So they might work the hills a little harder on the way up, and they might go a little easier on the way down. That might not be the way you want to run. Others might decide to take it a little easier on the uphills and make that time back on the downhills, so they might go faster. Again, might not be the way you want to run, but if you talk to them in advance and you know what they're going to do, then you can adjust yourself, and you might find yourself passing them and just kind of hopping them back and forth throughout the course. Totally fine, but as long as you know what they're doing, it really eases your mind. And then, Amy said, use them early on in that in the race to sort of let them do the work, keep you slow. It's really hard to stay focused for the course of a marathon. The brain just doesn't do it. You can't focus for that long. So really let them do the hard work. They've got the watch. They're watching the splits. Just tag on and tune your mind out. Just go along for the ride for a little while. And then late in the race, when you actually need to start thinking and start using that brain, you're going to be a little bit more fresh. You're not going to be worn out from those early miles trying to do math or trying to make sure that you are doing okay. At that moment, you've been on a good path.
And if you really need to keep your mind kind of engaged, some of the places on the course that you can think about would be going over the Jackson Street Bridge. You get an amazing view. And be careful, because some people will actually stop and take a picture, because this is a very iconic picture spot. So do not be afraid if people stop around, I think it's after mile 3 before you get into the MLK, this lovely bridge right here. A lot of people actually stop and take a picture. So just be aware that usually they're going to pull off onto the right, take a beautiful picture, and then they're going to hop back on. And then you're going to go through the MLK area, which is just full of amazing history. There's also another water stop in there. So use some of that stuff to kind of keep your mind busy during the race. And then some of the houses over here are just really fun. There's lovely purple colors and all sorts of really fun stuff. So if you need to get your mind off of something, definitely start taking a look around, because it's going to keep you kind of entertained, I guess, would be a good way to put it.
Yeah, these early miles, especially, as Amy said, it's kind of, you want to go out easy and relaxed. Ideally, as we tell people at Runner's World, you want a negative split in a marathon, which seems really hard. I'm going to run the second half of the marathon faster than I ran the first half, but what about the wall? If you do it right and you go out easy and you take in those sights, don't worry, relax. You will end up going a little bit slower over that first half and have the energy to avoid the wall at mile 20 and pick it up in the second half. So consider, until you get up about here, just a sightseeing tour. Don't worry about it. Take in the sights. When you come out of Piedmont Park, and then you can kind of start thinking about it. I know why you're laughing here. When you come out of Piedmont Park, you're in for a little bit of a surprise. We're going to tell you it.
Yeah, I would definitely stay relaxed until you come out of Piedmont Park, because pretty much from middle of Piedmont Park all the way over here, there's some lovely climbs. They're probably going to be your toughest miles, because there's a lot of just really ups and downs and some of the longest climbs that you have until towards the end. But that is going to be a big section. So the calmer, more relaxed you can stay up until 9 miles, the better off you're going to be able to handle this mileage right here with a lot of the hills. But they do give you oranges in the middle of that. So, hey, but stay relaxed until you get to that part. And then when you get to that part, really start to focus a little bit more to get through those hills.
So I don't know if you guys can see this map, or if you've looked at the map already, you've kind of noticed it's basically 2 loops, right? So the first loop is the half marathon course. You're going to share that with the half marathoners. Everybody's going to run this same course. And then when you come back through the start area, then you're going to split off and do your own. Well, I guess it's a loop. It's got a lot of turns, especially when you get down here. But Amy, can you talk about what happens here in this area? Is it confusing? How easy is it to follow? And how do you make that transition into that second loop?
So the thing you really need to be careful about is some people that you're running with could be running the half, and some people could be running the marathon. And those that are running the half get really, really excited. So from about a little before 12 to about 12 and a half, there's a half-mile climb. And if you're running the half marathon, you're starting to get kind of excited because the finish line is coming up, and you might run that hill a little bit harder. You're running the marathon, probably not so much. But if you get excited and follow those half marathoners and start picking it up with them, probably not going to feel good for you in a couple miles. So when you're running around people and they start getting excited, start moving, maybe ask them if they're running the half marathon or the marathon so that you understand and you know and you don't get sucked into that finish of the half marathon, just more the synergy of it. Because when they come, they're going to take a left, and you guys are going to, the marathoners are going to keep going straight. And there'll be tons of people, and there'll be signs. They'll say marathoner, half marathoner. So just make sure that you are well aware at that point. It does get a little bit quieter once the half marathoners leave. So just be aware of that mentally, that once the half marathoners finish, the marathoners sometimes feel a little bit lonely because maybe you were running with all half marathoners, and now you are the only marathoner left. And so make sure when you talk to people, know kind of, hey, are you going to end with the half marathon? Though there are marathoners that decide they're not doing the second half and they finish anyways. But most of the time they do keep going. So realize that mentally sometimes for marathoners that middle part is a little bit harder because you get a little bit let down when all your buddies kind of pull off and finish.
Is anybody running the half marathon? Okay. Well, you're done running now, but don't leave because we got a couple more tips for you that we're going to do. But when you come out of here, you're coming away from an area that's got a lot of energy right now. This weekend, it's electric. Like the next couple of days, you're going to feel it, or you've already seen people out here running because there's a big race happening on Saturday, and there'll be that energy will carry over. You've seen it out here. So when you start going away from this, a lot of that energy starts to go away. As Amy said, the field is thinned out a little bit. So I would say my tips for the marathoners is through here is when you really need to start using your head and just sort of do a check. Like you're past the halfway point, but I like to say the halfway point isn't until 20 miles. I know that math doesn't work, but I'm an editor and we work with words, so I don't have to work with numbers and prove it. But when you pass 13, you're not really halfway, but it's a good point when you come through there to just do a check and say, okay, how do I feel? Am I working a little too hard this early in the race? Take a couple good breaths. Make sure your shoulders are relaxed. You got a lot of running left to do. You don't want to allow any of that stress to trickle on down into your body. So this is a really good point when it settles down to just settle yourself down again and just check in with yourself.
And then when you come down, there are a lot of turns. So sometimes when people start hurting, because if you've run a marathon before, you're going to have good miles and you're going to have bad miles. And sometimes what I tell people is just get to the next turn and get to the next turn. And sometimes if you do that, it kind of makes the marathon seem a little bit more tolerable, taking it into little bites. We tell our marathoners that are racing on Saturday, we say just water stop to water stop. Get to your next bottle, get to your next bottle. And you can also do that as well. There's different water stops. There's different fueling stops. On this one, you get some peanut butter pretzels and bananas and raisins and who knows what. But I would caution, if you have not tried any of these things on your own run, don't try anything new, all right? Try to stick to what you've been doing because you're not really sure what's going to happen to your body and your GI tract if you try something new, especially towards the end of the marathon. But this is definitely, I would tell people, go turn to turn if you're starting to have problems with the race.
It's interesting that when you say turn to turn now, we're getting into a part of the course down here in the 1920. I don't know what's going on here, and I have no idea quite where the course goes. It does a lot of little turns in there. Is it really just a product of this map kind of being small, or do you have a lot of quick turns that may be annoying?
I mean, even up in here, there are some quick turns as well in the half marathon, and so sometimes it's a product of going around certain areas in Atlanta, and sometimes it's a product of where we can get permitted in neighborhoods. But there is one cobblestone street down here that I can't remember which street it's on, but there is cobblestone. Atlanta? So Jessica's saying it's the Atlanta street. So there is a little bit of cobblestone. So when you hit that, definitely make sure that we're being aware, we're watching our feet, and we are being very careful because, as we know, the sidewalks can bite, but so can cobblestones as well. So be very careful when you get to this section down here. But there are definitely a few more turns in the second half, which I guess if it's going to keep you awake, it's better to be in the second half.
Yeah, if you're running turn to turn, that's a good point to just like, okay, I only have to go 100 yards to that next turn. That's the part where, it's going to start to hurt. I ran a marathon back in October, and you're going to go through these moments where it doesn't make any sense. Like at 17 miles, I was like, this is easy. I was over 19 miles, it felt like somebody dropped a refrigerator on my back. It was like so fast it changed, and I made a deal with some bad powers, and I was like, just get me through the next half mile. I slowed down. I consciously said, you know what? I'm under my goal. I can give back 10 or 15 seconds. Just slow down, get to the next mile mark, and then reassess and see how you're going. And within that next mile, I was pretty much back to where I was. Maybe not quite like I was feeling at 17 and happy, but I wasn't in that suck fest. So just know that you're going to go through these waves somewhere in there where it's going to be like tears of joy, tears of pain. You might think you have a blister, but it's probably just your brain being dumb. Just get through it. Like, it's going to happen. And if you have a mantra, now's a good time to start saying it to yourself. And if you don't know what a mantra is, like, it's just one of these little lines that you can repeat to yourself to give yourself some strength or to knock yourself out of that negative talk. I know people who, just dream of the finish so they can have a glass of wine, or, one more step, or you are strong, or whatever you want to do that really just kind of rallies you through those dark times, because they will come at 26 miles. I don't care how you run it, how fast you do it, how slow you do it, whether you walk run it, at some point, it's a long way, and you're just going to say, I want to be done. And you got to be able to snap out of that.
And if any of you have support systems out there with you, if you know there's a mile that usually you have issues with, convince them to go to that mile. Convince them to go out there and meet you, have a sign, whatever they're going to do. But sometimes that's really fun. It's just knowing that you're going to get to that support system, get to that person. And then, if there are people out there cheering, high five them, look at their signs, read their signs, whatever you need to do to get yourself through it. I use mantras all the time. That's one of my favorite things to do. But in this race, there are definitely going to be times, like you said, that are not going to be going to be fun. But also, I would recommend that you start fueling early and often in this race so that you don't kind of start hitting that wall earlier and earlier. People think it's not going to be warm. Yay, I don't have to. No, hydrate and fuel early and often. I would definitely just start at the beginning, because if you wait until the third or fourth one, you're already in a hole that you can't make up for. So start early, start often, even if it's cooler, even if you think, oh, this is the best weather I've ever had for this training and this race, still please start fueling early and often.
Amy, what is we see the hydration stations are every mile and a half or so. Do you know what the nutrition is on the course? What hydration is out there?
So we have the water at those markers. And then we have the hydration and the fuel is going to be here. So we have the Cliff, we have oranges, and we have Cliff again. We have peanut butter pretzels, bananas, and raisins out on the course.
And is there sports drink at the water stations, or
good question?
I didn't look that up.
I know
I meant to.
Do we have sports drink? We do. We have Powerade. Yes.
Powerade.
Yes. And they usually make them in huge quantities. Actually, I made them at the 10-miler myself, so I actually know we've done that a few times. So there should be, I'm not sure what flavor we have, but they'll be with the water, and usually they're going to there'll be a volunteer out there that is going to be saying water or Powerade at which table it is. So make sure that you understand and listen to which one you're grabbing, because if you're not used to Powerade, if that's too strong for you, it could cause have cramps or whatever. So make sure that you understand which one that you're grabbing, especially if you're going to throw one over your head as well. Figure that one out before that happens, because that's always fun to be sticky for the next 10 miles.
Yeah, and if you're taking gels and drinking Powerade, it can be a lot of sugar in your stomach. So if you have a tendency to not want to eat a lot on the run, I don't tend to do so well with the sugars. What I like to do is alternate. So take water at one station, Powerade at the next, water again, and you'll sort of feel it. If it starts to slosh, maybe skip a station. But as Amy's right, it's going to be cool. It's going to be partly sunny, so you're not going to think it's like typical oppressive Atlanta heat. I don't need to drink, but you really do, because you may not feel it early on. And again, you're going to be feeling really good because you're fresh, but it will sneak up on you, and you can't catch up when it gets too late. You're not going to be able to just like stop and drink a big glass and start feeling well again. It's too late. The damage is done.
And how many of you are going to be out there watching on Saturday? All right. So if you do start feeling, really painful during the marathon, think about what you watched the day before. Think about all of the athletes that were out there and the things that they went through, and use that kind of as a motivation for what you're going to do, because you will go underneath the rings. You will get to see they. Of course, the cauldron will be extinguished on Saturday, so unfortunately, you guys won't be able to see that on Sunday. But it will be lit from, I think, 12 to 3:30 on Saturday. So if you do want to see it lit, go out there and cheer for them around that area on Saturday.
So I want to talk strategy of actually running a marathon for a couple seconds. Who actually has a time goal? Yeah, all right. The way I like to break up the marathon, especially if you have a time goal, but it works for anybody really, is to break it up into three true sections: 10 miles, 10 miles, and 10K. So you can just remember 10, 10, 10. It's pretty simple. The first 10 miles, I preach going out slow. I don't care how fast you're trying to run, go out slow. So those first 10 miles, I typically say go out like 6 seconds per mile slow. So when you come through the 10-mile mark, you're a minute behind where you want to be. And that seems really insane, right? I know. I don't do math, like I said, but even I know that's not good. The next 10 miles is, I say, dead on your marathon effort. So if you want to hit 8:30 per mile, 9 minutes per mile, nail it, dead on through those. And it's going to be a little tricky because the hills are going to keep coming. That's why I say effort, not necessarily split. But you want to be dead on effort. So you're going to come through 20 miles where you should be hitting the wall, and you're still a minute behind where you want to be. Still nutty, right? But if you've done it right, you held back early, you didn't do anything dumb, and then you rolled through at marathon pace, which you've practiced and through those 10 miles, you should be feeling really fresh at 20 miles. It sounds crazy, but I promise it works. That last 10K is when it's time to race. That's when it's time to turn on the brain, start thinking about picking people off, because those people who weren't smart like you are going to start coming back to you really fast. They suffer, they blow up, they hit the wall. And there is no greater feeling than passing somebody at 21 miles when they're just in the hurt locker. And you got a smile on your face, and you're looking at your watch, and it's the fastest mile you've run all day long. And then 22 is actually even faster. And 23 is faster still. I've seen this time and time again. We do it all the time. 10, 10, 10 works. And so you start racing that last 10K, and you'll pick that minute back up and then some. A little way, the flip side of it, I like to say, is bank equals bonk. So if you try to bank time by going out fast, you will bonk, blow up, give all that back, and then some. So, save it early on. Take that 10, 10, 10 approach. And if you don't want to break it up like that, just go out conservatively in those first few miles in the hills.
And that's what we tell the elites as well, is it's 20 miles pretty much tempo, and it's a 10K race, and hopefully that works out well for a lot of them. But yeah, it's most of the time how people break it up. Yep.
Yeah, so it applies a very similar thing. Your chunks would be shorter. It's not quite as tidy as 10, 10, 10. But again, you want to go out through those first few miles very easily. I would say you're really racing the last 5K in the half marathon. So you have a little more wiggle room. You may not blow up as badly, and even if you do blow up, you don't have to suffer as long as you would in a marathon. I mean, I've walked the last 5 miles of a marathon because my hamstrings just wouldn't allow me to run. Sucks. It's terrible. And people cheer for you, and they're like, you're almost there, and you're like, shut up. It's awful. But in a half, it doesn't really happen like that. You're like, yeah, and I can walk the last 3 miles if I really do blow up, and it's not so bad. And so you can, if you go through those first few miles easy, you can start picking it up a little bit earlier and taking a few more risks. But really, you get to that 10-mile mark, and then you should be thinking, okay, now it's time to really start working. And it's going to hurt a little bit again if you're really getting after it, but the strategy still remains the same. Start 5K, sure.
I like that. We'll go with that. Especially since when you hit kind of 10, that's when you definitely are going to have to be on pace, because you're going to have to deal with the hills and going up and down. I've had a couple people that on our courses, if they start having trouble, what I tell them is, as long as the muscles aren't really spasming at this point, use the downhills to kind of regain some momentum. So let's say if some people start walking up the hills and they run down the hills, That's okay to do if you need to regain the momentum, and that's all right. So sometimes if you're having trouble, say, all right, I'll walk this one. I'm going to use the downhill. I'm going to regain momentum, and then I'm going to keep going. And for some people it's worked. However, if some of the muscles are definitely cramping and spasming, probably not the best idea to try to use the downhill. But if you're doing okay and you're just tired, try to use those downhills to regain.
Yeah, of course, we kind of scare you with it. The hills are tough, and it's true, but also that gives you a good amount of variety. And so we talked about with the earlier on, Amy and I were talking about in the Olympic trials race on Saturday. It's really going to be interesting to watch because some of those runners are rhythm runners and they're just going to settle into a pace and just try to hammer, right? And this course doesn't allow that. They have to shift gears as they're going up and think about it, and so it might reward a different type of runner. But it's really brutal to run 26 miles on flat ground. I mean, if you've ever run at Disney World or Chicago, it's like you're just itching for a hill. You're like some part of your body is just abused from the constant pounding, and so this actually works really well because when you're going up the hill, you're going to use different muscle groups and different systems than you're going to use when you come back down. So you get a break, and you're never really taxing one group for just hours on end. So while it sounds scary, I actually prefer hilly rolling courses because they just are a little bit more forgiving on you, and you get that break, right? You work hard to a top of a hill, and it's like, oh, I'm at the top of the hill. It's free speed now. I get to go. Don't do the free speed thing, by the way. You'll pay the price. But it's a little bit of a break. You can be like, I don't have to work as hard now. So you get that variety.
And there's also a few places where you get to take a turn before you go up a really big hill, so you can just kind of laugh at the hill as you turn. That's when I was driving it today. That's what we did. We're like, yay, we don't have to go up that one. All right, here we go. So just whatever little things you can use throughout the race to get yourself through it is definitely recommended. If you laugh at the hills you don't have to do, that's even better.
Should we talk about a couple things to do between now and the start before we open up for a few questions?
That would be great. I don't know about you, but food is probably the biggest question that we get. We want to make sure that you hydrate. We want to make sure that you're doing electrolytes and not just plain water, because if you don't want to flush all your electrolytes, a lot of people as long as you do not have a medical issue that you're not supposed to have salt, it's encouraged to increase some of the salt to keep some of the water in. And it's best to do not a lot of fiber between now and the race. We definitely want to make sure that your GI tract is behaving. So nothing new and not a lot of fiber is the two things that I usually try to preach.
Yeah, that's true. And we were talking earlier with an elite science of marathon strategy, and Amby Burfoot, who's won the 1968 Boston Marathon, was up here, and he said, in my day, race week, we used to just cut out all carbs for like 4 days and just eat nothing but protein and fat. And then 3 days out, we'd flip it, and we'd eat no protein and fat and just house the carbs, spaghetti. And you don't need to do that. We've learned science has actually come along, and that strategy, it's a little late to go on the protein and fat, by the way, anyway. But we don't need quite as much of that carbo loading as we thought so many years ago. And but it is good to have that well-balanced meal, not quite as much fiber as Amy said. But don't think you need a mountain of spaghetti to get through the marathon. If you've been eating well and you're showing up healthy, you're going to be fine. But some carbs mixed in the next couple of days is actually going to be, easy on your system mostly.
And I have a funny story about that because I have 7 marathoners racing on Saturday, and I have a lot of in-training participants racing on Sunday, and I've always said that as well. And so we have all the athletes follow this very specific diet for Saturday. Well, the last 2 marathons, I had 3 marathons, one of them ran, and 2 of them I made him follow this diet, and it did not go well. So then this last one, he wanted to go old school and go back to that. And I was like, I don't, I was like, well, they've shown it really doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. And he just begged me. He's like, look, yours hasn't worked. I'm going to try this one. And he ran like a 5-minute PR at Chicago. So I was like, okay, so this time 1 out of 7 is going to go old school, and the other 6 are going to go new science.
That's a good point. People respond to some things and they don't respond to others. So if there's something that you've been doing that works and you're comfortable with it, ignore us. By and large, we have some decent advice, but if it works for you, who am I to say don't do it or do something different?
I mean, I fought him for that one, and I'm like, I wonder what he would have run if I would have let him do what he wanted.
So you mentioned nothing new at race day.
Nothing new at race day.
If you picked up shoes or a new shirt here today,
Yep.
It's going to look awesome on Monday.
Yep.
Don't break it out. Don't use something new. Some of us will. I was the shoes and gear editor at Runner's World for a long time, and I'm still a shoe geek, so I would wear new shoes. I don't recommend people do that, but that was like part of the thing I knew what I could get away with. So you don't want to, if you've been doing all your long runs in a certain outfit, and that's the way you're going to race in, stick with it. It should be what you've done all along the way. And to that point with your whatever you're going to wear, let's see, Saturday night, lay everything out. You've seen the photos on Instagram or on social media of like the flat Jeff, singlet, bib, pinned on already, the shorts, the arm warmers, do that and make sure you have everything because you can visualize it and see what you're missing. Also, a cautionary tale, I ran Boston in 2015 and I was in an Airbnb with a bunch of people, and when I woke up on race morning, I had no power in my bedroom that I was staying in. The rest of the house had power. I just didn't. And it was black in the morning in my room. So I was like, luckily I had put everything in a pile in my room, and so everything was in one neat little stack. So I could get dressed in the dark. I knew where everything was. I didn't have to fumble through a bag or find that, oh, I don't have my gels or whatever you need or your body glide. So if you have all of that taken care of, maybe even tomorrow night, make sure you've got everything so you can make a trip to the running store if you need something on Saturday. But if you've got all that laid out, it reduces any kind of possible stress on Sunday morning, because the last thing you want is to show up to the start line harried and frantic and like feeling like your confidence is rattled because something went wrong. If you eliminate any of those kinds of possibilities, you're setting yourself up for success.
And it goes with how to get to the race. All of you are here, so you picked up your bib numbers. You'd be surprised the number of people that show up on Sunday and think they could get it then. So if you have any friends running, remind them, pick up your bib now, unless you did the will call, which you should know that you paid for that if you did it. However, know where you're going and how to get here. Know what roads are closed. Know when they close. There's a great graph and a lovely Excel sheet on our website that says what roads are closed, when they're closed, and how long they're closed. All right, so know how to get here. MARTA is probably going to be your best friend. Going back, I'm sure it smells great when you go back afterwards with all the runners. But know how to get here. Know the best way to get here. Know where to go when you get here, where you're going to meet people afterwards, so that it takes that amount of stress off. It's really, I hate when I see people just frantic and running towards the start line because they didn't figure out how to get here and they got lost, or they thought Uber was going to be great, but they couldn't get as close as they thought, and then they got turned around and they went the other direction. So just kind of take a look at the map really quickly the next 2 days and figure out your best strategy of A, getting here, and B, where you're meeting people and how you're getting home.
Yeah, and Saturday and Sunday both, MARTA starts really early. I think Saturday it was like 5 a.m. and Sunday it's like 4:30 a.m. It starts really early, and the trains are going to run more frequently, so it won't be long waits. They're going to get you here. That's really going to be an easy way, rather than trying to find a place to park or just being stuck in traffic trying to get down to here. It's going to get congested. So again, it all comes down to just eliminating those stresses and not having any kind of hassle whatsoever. Show up to the start line with. I'm a big believer of getting to the start early. It's cold out there. I know Atlanta, like I came from New York City and it was actually warmer there this morning than it was here when I landed, and this doesn't make sense. I know it's going to seem cold, but so bring a sweatshirt that you don't mind discarding if you have to. Get here early though, have a layer that you can wear, and eliminate all that stress.
And make sure that when you leave your house, you bring something with you to drink, so that you're also not trying to find something before the race and you don't go into the race dehydrated. So just make sure that you bring any snacks that you need with you and hydration, because it will be a little bit harder to find stuff, A, that early, B, the Starbucks line over there gets really long. They don't open as early as we'd like, usually because we're here really early as well. So bring the stuff you're going to need to hydrate and fuel yourself before the race. It's not going to be easy to find anything here to do that.
I guess one last thing is weather. I said it's going to be cold. I think it's, with the exception of the little bit of wind that we were talking about and which direction you're going to get hit by it, and whether it actually changes course entirely and it's 75 on race morning. But if it looks and holds like it is, the temperature is going to be just about perfect for distance running. I mean, it's going to be outstanding. If you're looking at low 40s, like that is, for me, shorts and singlet weather and gloves. My fingers get cold, so I just little cotton gloves, or I have smart wool liners, and that's really it. Maybe I'd have a cap for the first mile that I end up tossing off, once you start warming up. But like, I don't like more than that. I'd rather run a little bit cold. But if you're the type who you do want to have a little bit more, a long sleeve shirt that you can put on or take off and tie around your waist is always a good choice. Having that layer that you can adjust, but I don't think we're going to need to overdress. It might seem pretty chilly when you're standing out there for a few minutes in the morning, but once you start moving, it's going to be outstanding.
Yeah, so definitely wear stuff that you are okay with losing. If you do want to, if you're going to get up and maybe take Marta and you want to wear pants or something, know that those, you may not get those back if you throw them off at the start line and stuff. But if you're with my training participants and you're in the training program, we keep our stuff in the tent. So that's kind of a nice perk of those that trained with us. And it's right at the finish line, so I get to watch everybody finish this year.
That VIP treatment's nice.
I know.
Take it. Should we open it up for questions? Questions, anybody? We didn't cover it all. I know there's somebody's got one. There we go.
I think he was saying to check the MARTA schedule because they're not going to be running both ways early in the morning. Is that what you're saying? The single track. All right, they're going to be running the single track. So definitely check the MARTA website to know, again, how far and how, where things are closed with the streets and when MARTA opens and where to go get it. What's the worst hill? So funny enough, when we drove it today, he measured every single hill. There are 23 hills in the half marathon. We didn't get so nitty-gritty picky with the marathon, but the first half, there's 23 hills. Your longest is actually half mile is from like 12 to 12 and a half. So that's the longest hill is like 0.51. The other ones they're really shorter. I mean, they're like 0.16, 0.23. I would say, other than this being the longest, your harder hills are going to be here. These are a little bit steeper. They're more like 400 meters, 500 meters, they're 600 meters, and they just keep coming, and they're all about the same. I mean, they're just, you just wonder when they're going to stop in this part.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky on this elevation chart because it's in meters too, so the vertical looks a little bit squished. You can see that 10 to 12 here, really. It's there. But if you look closely, you'll see after like 20 to 22, 24, that's generally kind of sloping up with a lot of little ones. So, again, saving something for that last 6 miles, really, because you're ultimately having to go uphill to the finish. That's probably going to be, if you're suffering, that's really going to be your worst hill of the day. That 6 mile hill, it's going to stink.
Any more questions?
Yeah, the question is about maintaining even effort if you're doing the 10-10-10, going uphill. Yeah. I mean, that's the smartest strategy for a longer event is even effort. As you shift gears, and if you find out what works for you in training, really, but managing your effort and making sure you're going to go slower on the uphills. If you're doing even effort, you're going to go faster on the downhills. That's typically going to be the smartest approach. I do a lot of mountain running up in New England, so I'm up in the Adirondack Mountains and the White Mountains, and so I like running uphills. So if I'm out on the course on Sunday, I won't be, but if I was, I would be leaving people on every uphill, and they would catch me on the downhill. It happens every single time. They curse me when I leave and run away. And it's not smart. I'm sure I'm not running the most efficient race I can, but that's just how I run. So, yeah, I think even effort and being able to manage that. If you're running with a heart rate monitor, know that your heart rate is a little bit slow to respond to changes in elevation. So you won't notice it right away if you get into a hill a little too hard. You'll see it by the time you get to the top. So really kind of being in tune with your body and knowing like how hard you're working. You can really gauge it by your breath. Your breathing rate is a lot more closely correlated to your effort than your heart rate anyway. So if you're paying attention to a few of those cues, you'll know you're on the right track.
And the only way to hear your breathing is to not wear headphones. And the only way to make new friends on the course is to not use headphones. Just my public service announcement of the day. And plus, if people are trying to pass you and coming in and stuff like that, if you're wearing headphones, you also can't hear those things as well. So if you train with us, we say no headphones. And you're not supposed to have headphones in any races, but we know that they're out there.
And you won't hear me cheer for you if you have your headphones on. So
You won't hear the funny comments that we make. I mean, you can read the signs, but you won't hear what they say to go along with the signs. So we're, just putting it out there.
well, thanks everybody, and I wish you the best of luck on Sunday. Luck.
Thanks. That was fun.
True story. I was running Big Sur one year, and I was trying to qualify for Boston, and I didn't really done the training to qualify for Boston. It was right after bombings, so I was like, oh, I should just go. Right? We were out there working, so I was just, trying to run like a 3-hour marathon, and I stopped for a porta potty break around halfway or so. And when I stepped out, just that little step down, I tweaked something in my hip, and I felt it like immediately pull, and so I kind of limped for a mile or two, trying to like get back on pace. And right about that time, a guy had passed me when I was in there.